We all know that these podcast interview style shows are like all the rage. I mean, everybody does them, and they always think like, hey, if you start a podcast, you got to do an interview style show. Everybody does it. That's how you do podcasting. But do you ever stop to think like, hey, what are the things that my audience are interested in? And I can tell you right now, it's not randomness.
Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening? How are you doing today? I want to say thank you so much for being here. I am Chris, and I'm from the original Chris and Christine Show podcast. You know, we're making episodes on over there at chrisandchristineshow.com. A link to it in the show notes of this very episode. You scroll on down, and there it is. Check that out. So, hey, how are you doing? Hey, how's that podcast coming along? Hey, you didn't start the podcast? Oh, you got it running, you say? Oh, well, how's it going? Do you enjoy podcasting? Is it everything you ever thought it would be? Is it fun? Are you having any fun podcasting? Maybe you are, maybe you're not. There's podcasts for everybody. Anybody can do it. And there's all kinds of styles of podcasting. You know, you can do the interview style. You can do the solo style like I'm doing right now. You can do like a co-hosted style. You can do all kinds of different things, you know, with your podcast. And I think one of the more popular styles of podcasting, well, at least for the last few years that I've seen, it's got to be like the interview style podcast. So many interview style shows out there. But the thing about the interview style show is that you're always kind of wondering, like, how is your interview style or how is your interview show any different than anybody else's interview show out there? And I guess it kind of really goes with almost any kind of topic you can think of when it comes to podcasting. Yeah, I know almost everything's been covered before. You think about all the movie review shows that are out there. Oh, I just thought of this. How about all the true crime shows that are out there? There's like so many true crime shows because they were so extremely popular. Everybody just jumped on and said, I'm going to do a true crime podcast. But I think some of these smarter true crime podcasts, you know, stepped out of the box and did things a little differently. You know, maybe it was true crime related to children or true crime related to adults or grandparents or true crime shows that happened in this town or true crime stuff that happens with a particular niche. Hey, you can podcast however you want to podcast. You know, it's your show. You are the captain of your podcast ship. You can do it however you want. You can copy somebody else's show, you know, pretty much the same thing if you really wanted to. I mean, don't copy the name of the show. I mean, you know, be your own thing, of course. But if you like a show, you like the style somebody else is doing, you know, it's okay to really maybe, you know, piggyback on some of their style of show. Don't copy their show word for word. Don't do that. I'm saying maybe their style of a show, you can put your own spin on it. But podcasting, listen, you can do it however you want. If you want to do a show about puppies or about dogs or cows or farm animals or maybe a farm animal true crime show or something like that, maybe an interview true crime animal farm zoo keeper show. I don't know. However you want to do it, it's your show. Enjoy it. The thing about podcasting is you can be creative as you possibly want to be. It's your show. There's always an audience, I found out, for almost anything out there. But today, we're going to focus on the guest interview style of podcasting, which seems to be pretty popular, if you ask me. Everybody does some version of an interview show. Now, whether you do a solo show and bring in guest interviews every once in a while, that's cool. You can do that. I do that too around here. I don't always have guests. I think the shows that kind of have to rely on having a guest interview like every single episode, well, if you do that, what usually seems to happen is they will do a backlog, like batch a bunch of interviews all at once, like interviewing every day for months and months straight. And what happens is you end up with a backlog of all these guest interviews, and you're thinking you're good for months in the future. Like, I can keep my podcast going for another 3 to 5 more months because I have all these interviews in the can already. But if you have too many episodes already pre-recorded and you start releasing them in order, and if you've recorded so many of them, what tends to happen is that, say you originally were a weekly show And now, because you interviewed this guest today, but because you have so many other interviews you've already recorded, this interview show may not even get released for months and months, maybe even a year into the future. Now, even if the content in that interview was to 100% evergreen, meaning that the content can be listened at any time for months and years into the future, and the content is still as good as it was today, even if that is possible, the guest is wondering like, hey, I did an interview on your show. Where's the episode? Why haven't you released it yet? Oh, I'm backlogged. I've got 100 other interviews I just did, with all these other people. And, you're going to be up next in the next, 8 months or 7 months or whatever. And the guest may be like, well, screw you, or maybe, if you don't inform the guest at all, and then all of a sudden you say, hey, your episode's going to be released this weekend. Here you go. Here's the link for it. Can you please share it? And you're like, wait, I did an interview with you? When was the interview I did with you? Oh, that's right. It was a year ago. I vaguely remember it. I don't even remember you. You did an interview with me? I did 18 interviews in the last year. I don't even remember yours because it was so long ago. They may not even share it. They may have forgot all about it. They may have already, closed down that business they were advertising on your show, and they have shut that operation down and moved on to something completely different. So those are some things to be aware of when you decide to have all these different guests that you book for your show, you backlog for your show. And so what happens is that sometimes instead of doing a weekly show just to get caught up on all the backlog of interviews, podcasters will decide to do, well, I'm going to do 2 episodes a week now, maybe even 3 episodes a week, just so I can kind of get caught up with all these backlog of interviews. That way, we're kind of moving forward to the present timeline from the guests we interviewed months and months ago. Now, more importantly than which guests you're going to have on and how important these guests are and what's their credibility and are they a celebrity? Are they a VIP? How important are these guests? More important than them is your audience. You should always be thinking of your audience and what your audience would like to hear. Your audience comes first, always. Now, one of the biggest problems that I have seen with interview-only style of shows is that they tend to do a mismatch of random people that have no connection to each other or no connection to your particular niche. Or do you even have a niche? Interviewing interesting people just for the sake of interviewing, just for the sake of talking to people that are VIPs is not a niche. That's not a category. Maybe this will help you understand things a little better. I love going to the movies. Maybe you love going to the movies too. Everybody loves movies. But there are certain movies that we would rather see, and there are certain movies we would rather not see. There are some movies that I see, I'm like, I'm not seeing that. And there's some movies like, ooh, I'm going to see that movie. Let's just say, for funsies here, that we have a ticket to go to the movies every day for an entire year. It's like some special ticket, golden ticket they're going to give us to go to the movies. Now, just think of that process by itself. Think of what it takes for you to leave your house, transport yourself, whether it's by train, by car, by bus, however you do it, over to the local movie theater, spend at least 3 hours there with commercials to see a movie, and then the ride back. So you're looking at maybe 5 hours of your day. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't really spare an extra 5 hours every day to go to the movies. Now, let's just say this golden ticket we're talking about here was to go to a movie, but here's the catch. You had no idea which movie it was going to be. Now, think of all of the movies that have ever existed in the history of movies. All of them. There are great movies and there are horrible movies. You have absolutely no idea which movie you're going to see after you spent the time getting over to the theater, sitting down there and watching that movie, wasting that entire time, and time's very precious, to sit there and watch a movie. And they said it could be a good movie. It could be a great movie. You have no idea which movie it is. Now, that might be fun for a few trips over there, but after a while, you're going to be like, well, I think I'd rather just go to the movie that I want to see. Why would I go to some random movie, waste my time, and see a movie that I would never, ever watch in a million years? That is what it's like when you have an interview only show and you interview completely random people. It's like saying to your audience, hey, I know you're going to spend your time with us, and time is very precious, but I'm going to give you something that has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with your interests. It's not something you would even care about, but please give me your time and listen to this interview with this guest because I interviewed this guest. If you try to make a show for everyone, eventually you make a show for no one. Oh no, so what do we do, Chris? How do we fix this? I love interviewing people. I love doing interview shows. That's all I know how to do. I can't do this by myself. I have to have a guest. I have to have a quote, co-hosted guest or a guest interview on my show. I can't do this by myself. What do I do? Are you telling me to shut my show down? No, I'm not. Just calm down, relax. We're going to fix this. This is where the power of having a particular topic or niche comes in handy. And going back to the random movie scenario, let's just replace random movie with movies that were particular to your favorite topics. Let's just say sci-fi movies. If you're into sci-fi, let's say westerns. If you're into westerns, let's say true crime or crime type movies. If you're into that kind of stuff. If we replace that randomness with a particular category that you would be interested in, you would probably go to the movies and check that out because it's something you're interested in. So if you decide to do guest interviews for your podcast, find guests that align directly with your content. So today I've got 5 advantages for podcasters like you that if you want to do interviews for your show, why it's possibly the best advantage to you to interview guests that are within your own niche. Okay, so kicking it off with number 1, and that is the audience targeting. You're targeting your audience by being focused on a specific niche, not random everything, randomness. You can tailor your content to a particular audience segment with shared interest because you and the audience have a common theme. You guys share the exact same content interests. You know, this targeted approach increases the relevance of your content, attracting listeners who may or more likely to engage with and benefit from your episodes. Advantage number 2. Now, you know what? Everybody wants to be an expert, and this will help you out. This will establishing your expertise. Constantly covering topics within a niche allows you to establish yourself as an authority in the area. You can't be an authority of everything. I don't think anybody is a doctor of everything. Does that even exist? I don't think so. Interviewing guests who are experts within that particular niche reinforces your credibility and positions you and your podcast as a trusted source of information on that subject matter. If you do a show about snail worms or snails or whatever they are, and you have Dr. Snails on the show and all you talk about is Dr. Snails and snail stuff, if I'm interested in snail stuff, then who am I going to? I'm going to you because that's all you talk about. You are the expert now. Moving on to advantage number 3, and also being an expert, this helps you build a dedicated audience. You know, when you constantly deliver content that aligns within your niche, you attract the dedicated audience that shares a passion for the topics that you are going to cover. These listeners are more likely to become loyal followers of your podcast, regularly tuning in for new episodes. And that's the hard part. It's easy to get someone to press play once. It's very hard to get them to press play twice. This will help them maybe even recommend your show to others who also shares interest in the exact same topic. All right, so moving on to advantage number 4, and that is if you have a particular brand to your show brand can't be interview everybody brand or the we interview smart people brand or we interview random people brand. I mean, nobody's going to buy that. That's just a bunch of nonsense. You want to maintain a cohesive branding. Focusing on a specific niche helps you maintain a cohesive branding across your entire podcast. This clarity in content direction makes it easier for new listeners to understand what your show is about and decide, you know what? Maybe I'll check this show out because the content aligns with things that I care about. And if you're listening to a show about topics that you care about, guess what you're going to do? You're going to hit subscribe. And the subscribers is what really matters because those people listen to your content with every new episode that you release. So the fifth and final tip I have today on what the advantage is of interviewing people that particularly fall into the niche that you have decided to make your show about is that you will maximize your engagement and impact. By delving deep into a specific niche, you can explore topics in greater detail and provide valuable insights that resonate directly with your audience. This depth of coverage enhances engagement, fosters meaningful discussions, and ultimately delivers greater impact in terms of educating, entertaining, and maybe even inspiring others. At the end of the day, you got to think about who is your podcast for and how can you best serve them? What are the things that you would want to listen to? What kind of topics drive you? What are you really into? Hey, you can podcast however you want to do it. It's your show. Like I said, you're the captain of your own show. But think of your audience. Think of what they want to listen to. Think of your audience before you think of yourself. Before you think of the downloads or you think of the guests I'm going to get on or the caliber of guests I'm going to have on. Don't even worry about that stuff. Think about what does your audience want to hear. And that is one of the reasons why I particularly cannot stand listening to an interview podcast that randomly interviews random people, because randomly has nothing to do with the things I'm into today or the things I'm going to do right now. I do not have the time to waste listening to something that I could care less about. Now, maybe they might have an interview with somebody I could want to listen to. That is a possibility. And I know that some shows, like the Joe Rogan show, are extremely popular. And he kind of does that style, that format. And a lot of these, I guess, celebrity style podcasts kind of do that same style, but they still follow kind of a format of some sort. They themselves are a celebrity. They themselves are somewhat famous. So they have that going for them. They already have an audience built in. So I really do believe the listeners to those style of shows are really drawn into that host because they're famous, because they love them as a celebrity. I followed a celebrity style interview show for a little while, but I dropped it because they were doing the random interviews and the interviews weren't very entertaining to me, at least. It didn't really deliver a backstory. There was no reason why. I think when you do these random interview shows or interview anybody style of a show, if you interview somebody on your podcast, there has to be a reason for the audience why they need to listen to this. What is it in it for them? You see, the audience could give two rips. They don't care about you. They don't care about your podcast. They don't care about your guests, especially. They don't care about them at all. They only care about themselves. So if whatever you're delivering is going to entertain them or educate them, being the audience, that is what they're into. And that is why they searched up a topic that directly took them towards your podcast. They typed in this subject A, and subject A took you to your podcast or a list of podcasts, and your podcast might have been in that list somewhere. You always got to be thinking, what does the audience want to hear, and how can I best serve them, and how can I best deliver a show that not only that you are proud of as the podcaster creating that show, that the audience hears it and they're like, wow, this is great information. I was well entertained. I was educated. That made me think. And this is definitely a topic they're talking about, is something that I really want to learn more about. So before you decide to book that VIP guest, I don't care how big they are, think, does this guest align with my content? Does this guest serve my audience best? Would the listener to my show, would they be interested in hearing from this guest? And I don't care who they are. think of your audience first. And speaking of that, I want to say thank you so much for being here and listening all the way to the end of this episode. I do these shows directly for you. I only do these shows to help out other podcasters that may need help crafting a show, getting a better show, making it sound amazing, drawing in an audience, and keep you podcasting. And don't pod fade. I know a lot of shows do that because, they give up or it gets frustrating, or don't get frustrated. Don't worry about it. Hey, if you have any questions or you need help, you always can email me at podtasticaudio@gmail.com. Link to it down the show notes somewhere, or go to the website. You'll find it there too. And until next time, happy podcasting.